Serial killers are not the unkempt, wild-eyed monsters of horror films. Many of them are charmingly ordinary, articulate, and even charismatic. This psychological trick, charm and manipulation to gain trust, is arguably their most effective weapon. It's how they disarm victims, bypass defenses, and escape suspicion from law enforcement and society. Ted Bundy is the textbook example. He was educated, well-spoken, and attractive qualities that made him seem completely non-threatening. Bundy used fake injuries, like a cast on his arm, to ask women for help loading books into his car. This simple ploy triggered an empathetic response and lowered their guard. Once they were close enough, he attacked. This trick hinges on surface-level social competence. The killer understands what behaviors inspire trust: smiling, maintaining eye contact, showing politeness, and presenting themselves as respectable members of society. Some, like Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, were church leaders and Boy Scout organizers. John Wayne Gacy performed as a clown at children's parties. Their public personas were meticulously crafted facades designed to hide their violent impulses. Psychologically, this manipulation exploits social scripts patterns we unconsciously follow. When someone appears friendly and in need, we're conditioned to respond with help and openness. Killers weaponize these social norms. Their charm is not authentic, it is instrumental. They deploy it as a tool, calibrated to lure, seduce, or neutralize suspicion. Beneath the charm lies a profound emotional void. Many serial killers exhibit traits of psychopathy, shallow emotions, lack of empathy, manipulativeness, and grandiosity. Psychopaths can mimic emotions they don't feel. They study others' reactions and mirror them convincingly. This ability to perform normalcy is chilling because it demonstrates how they cognitively understand human behavior without experiencing it emotionally. The charm also serves another purpose, preserving the killer's double life. By appearing likable and trustworthy, they avoid suspicion even as bodies pile up. Investigators often struggle to see the nice guy next door as a murderer. This cognitive dissonance gives killers time and freedom to continue killing. In criminal profiling, this trait is categorized under the organized killer type, those who plan carefully, maintain self-control, and blend into society. Their charm is premeditated. It's not spontaneous kindness. It's a calculated strategy. Victims who fall prey to this trick often report feeling safe, even comfortable, right before the attack. This demonstrates the killer's skill at reading people and environments. They know when to smile, when to offer help, when to play vulnerable. Understanding this trick is crucial for awareness and prevention. Trust should never be automatic. Healthy skepticism, especially in isolated or unfamiliar situations, can save lives. The takeaway: charm without substance is a red flag. True empathy involves consistency, accountability, and emotional depth, qualities that psychopathic killers cannot genuinely sustain. Serial killers are opportunistic predators. They do not choose victims randomly. Instead, they target individuals with specific vulnerabilities, social, emotional, or situational weaknesses that make them easier to control, less likely to resist, and less likely to be immediately missed. This trick relies on keen observation and cold calculation. Killers study their environment and identify patterns. They look for people who are isolated, marginalized, or struggling. Runaways, sex workers, hitchhikers, substance abusers, and individuals experiencing homelessness are statistically overrepresented among serial killer victims, not because they are less valuable, but because their circumstances make them more accessible and less protected. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, explicitly targeted sex workers because he believed they were easy to pick up and that their disappearances would generate less public concern. He was partially correct. For years, his crimes went unnoticed or under-investigated, allowing him to kill dozens of women. Aileen Wuornos targeted middle-aged men who solicited her as a sex worker. Her choice was strategic. These men were unlikely to be seen as victims, and their interactions with her were secretive, reducing the chance of witnesses. The psychological mechanism here is victim selection based on perceived risk versus reward. Killers weigh their chances of success against the likelihood of being caught. Victims who are socially invisible, emotionally vulnerable, or geographically isolated present low risk and high reward. Emotional vulnerabilities are equally exploited. A lonely person craving connection, a teenager seeking validation, or someone in crisis may overlook warning signs. Killers like Jeffrey Dahmer used loneliness as a weapon. He picked up men at bars, often targeting those who were intoxicated or socially isolated, and brought them home under the guise of companionship or intimacy. Situational vulnerabilities matter too. Victims in the wrong place at the wrong time, walking alone at night, stranded with car trouble, accepting rides from strangers are easy targets. Ted Bundy exploited such moments repeatedly, appearing helpful and harmless before revealing his true intent. This trick also involves dehumanizing the victim. To To the killer, the victim is not a person with dreams, family, and value. They are an object, a means to an end. This cognitive distortion is common in psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder. By seeing victims as less than human, the killer eliminates psychological barriers like guilt or empathy. From a sociological perspective, this exploitation reflects broader societal failures. Marginalized communities often lack resources, visibility, and protection. Killers know this and take advantage. They thrive in the gaps where social safety nets fail. Awareness and prevention require addressing these vulnerabilities at both individual and systemic levels. Individuals should be cautious about isolation, avoid risky situations when possible, and maintain connections with trusted people. Society must do better at protecting vulnerable populations through housing support, addiction treatment, mental health services, and law enforcement that takes all victims seriously. Understanding this trick reveals the cold, predatory logic behind victim selection. It's not random, it's strategic, and recognizing that can empower both potential victims and those who work to protect them. One of the most psychologically complex tricks serial killers use is ritualistic behavior and symbolism. Unlike impulsive violence, their murders often follow specific patterns, rituals, and symbolic acts that satisfy deep psychological needs. These rituals are not random, they are tied to the killer's fantasies, identity, and compulsions. What is a ritual in this context? It's a repeated behavioral pattern that holds personal significance. For serial killers, rituals might involve how they approach victims, the method of killing, the treatment of the body afterward, or the collection of souvenirs. These acts are psychologically necessary, they complete the fantasy and provide emotional gratification. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, followed strict rituals. His acronym BIND, Torture, Kill describes his method. He would stalk victims for weeks, plan meticulously, then bind, torture, and ultimately strangle them. After the murder, he took photographs, kept clothing or personal items, and relived the crimes through fantasy and masturbation. These trophies and photos were not just mementos, they were extensions of his control, allowing him to psychologically possess his victims even after death. Jeffrey Dahmer had elaborate post-mortem rituals involving dismemberment, preservation of body parts, and even cannibalism. For Dahmer, these acts were attempts to keep his victims with him forever. He feared abandonment and loneliness, and his rituals were twisted efforts to create permanent, controllable companionship. The psychological function of ritual is multi-layered. First, identity reinforcement. The ritual becomes part of the killer's self-concept. It defines who they are in their secret world. Second, fantasy fulfillment. The murder is the climax of a long-running internal script. The ritual ensures the script is followed. Third, anxiety reduction like compulsive behaviors in OCD, rituals provide psychological relief. Performing the ritual correctly soothes the killer's inner turmoil. Fourth, power and control rituals impose order on chaos. By dictating every detail, the killer asserts total dominance. Symbolism is closely linked. Posing the body, for example, sends a message to the killer himself, to investigators, or to an imagined audience. The Zodiac Killer sent cryptic letters and symbols to newspapers embedding his crimes in a larger narrative. This wasn't just for attention, it was part of his psychological ritual, transforming murder into a game, a puzzle, a legacy. Ritualistic killers are often organized offenders. They plan meticulously, control the crime scene, and leave few forensic mistakes. Their rituals require time, privacy, and preparation, further evidence of their psychological need for control. Criminal profilers use ritual analysis to link crimes and understand the offender's psychology. A consistent ritual can be a signature, an unchanging element that reveals the killer's core motivations and emotional needs. Understanding rituals also helps explain why serial killers don't stop. The ritual is never fully satisfying. Each enactment brings temporary relief, but the underlying psychological void remains. This drives the killer to repeat the cycle, often escalating in violence or frequency. Prevention and investigation benefit from recognizing ritual patterns. If crimes share unusual, specific details, they may be connected to the same offender. Awareness of ritualistic behavior can also inform threat assessments and psychological evaluations. Serial killing is not a one-time act. It's a compulsion, a psychological addiction. This trick isn't something the killer consciously uses on victims. It's a mechanism that traps the killer in a repetitive, escalating cycle. Understanding this dependency reveals why serial killers don't stop on their own. Many serial killers describe an unbearable urge to kill. Edmund Kemper said he just wanted to see what it felt like to kill his grandmother. After his first murders, he couldn't stop. Henry Lee Lucas said the urge was uncontrollable. He had to kill. This compulsion functions like an addiction in several ways. First, tolerance early murders provide intense psychological gratification. Power, control, sexual release, relief from inner tension. Over time, the effect diminishes. The killer needs to kill more frequently or more violently to achieve the same emotional high. Jeffrey Dahmer escalated from murder to necrophilia to cannibalism, constantly seeking more extreme acts. Second, withdrawal symptoms between killings. Many killers experience agitation, anxiety, and obsessive thoughts. The only cure is another murder. This mirrors substance addiction, where the absence of the drug causes distress. Third, fantasy reinforcement between murders. Killers fantasize obsessively. These fantasies are not passive daydreams, they are active mental rehearsals that intensify the urge. Ted Bundy consumed violent pornography and fed his fantasies for years before killing. Once he started, each murder fueled more fantasies, which fueled more murders. Fourth, loss of control. Many killers report feeling compelled or driven by forces beyond their control. While this is often a deflection of responsibility, it reflects the psychological reality that the compulsion has hijacked their decision-making. Dennis Rader stopped killing for years, but the urge eventually returned, overpowering his self-restraint. The psychological dependency is rooted in the killer's internal world. Childhood trauma, emotional neglect, and early exposure to violence create deep psychological wounds. Killing becomes a maladaptive coping mechanism, a way to assert control, express rage, or fill an emotional void. Fantasy is the engine. Long before the first murder, the future killer nurtures violent fantasies. These fantasies provide escape, power, and satisfaction. When external stressors accumulate, relationship failure, job loss, humiliation, the fantasy intensifies. Eventually, fantasy alone isn't enough. The killer crosses the threshold into reality. After the first murder, the psychological equation changes. The killer has acted out the fantasy. This act provides validation and empowerment, but it also creates a new psychological need to relive and surpass the experience. The murder becomes a reference point, a memory to be enhanced through repetition. Criminal psychologists note that this dependency is self-sustaining. Each murder reinforces the neural pathways associated with arousal, power, and relief. The brain becomes conditioned to seek this reward, making it harder to stop with each successive kill. Intervention is nearly impossible once this dependency is established. Unlike substance addiction, there's no medication or therapy proven to cure the compulsion to kill. Incarceration is the only certain way to stop the cycle. Understanding this trick helps explain the persistence and escalation of serial murder. It's not rational. It's compulsive, driven by a psychological dependency that consumes the killer's identity and life. Perhaps the most chilling psychological trick serial killers use is emotional detachment and lack of remorse. This trait is central to psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder, personality structures that allow individuals to commit horrific acts without guilt, empathy, or emotional conflict. What does emotional detachment look like? It's the ability to harm, torture, and kill without experiencing the emotional responses that prevent such behavior in most people. Empathy, feeling another's pain, is absent or severely impaired. Remorse, regret for wrongdoing, is non-existent. Ted Bundy could discuss his murders clinically, as if describing a research project. He felt no guilt. John Wayne Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and buried most of them in his crawl space. When arrested, he expressed annoyance, not remorse, at being caught. Gary Ridgway killed over 70 women and described them as garbage he was cleaning up. This emotional coldness is not accidental. It's a core feature of psychopathy, a personality disorder characterized by superficial charm, lack of empathy, manipulativeness, grandiosity, lack of remorse, and impulsivity. Robert Hare's psychopathy checklist is the gold standard for assessing psychopathy. Many serial killers score very high. Emotional detachment enables killing in several ways. First, dehumanization. The victim is not seen as a person with feelings, family, and worth. They are an object, a means to satisfy the killer's needs. This cognitive distortion removes the psychological barrier that empathy normally provides. Second, moral disengagement. The killer rationalizes their actions. They might blame the victim, minimize harm, or deny responsibility. These mental gymnastics allow them to continue killing without internal conflict. Third, emotional regulation. While most people experience guilt and anxiety after harming someone, psychopathic killers do not. This lack of negative emotion means there's no internal punishment to deter future violence. Fourth, normalization of violence over time. Killing becomes routine. The first murder may cause some emotional disturbance, but subsequent murders are easier. The killer's emotional system habituates to violence. Neuroscience supports this. Brain imaging studies show that psychopaths have reduced activity in the amygdala, which processes emotion, and the prefrontal cortex, which controls impulse and moral reasoning. Their brains are wired differently, making emotional detachment almost structural. This detachment also allows killers to maintain double lives. They can appear normal at home, work, and in social settings because they compartmentalize. The killer identity exists separately from the public persona. There's no emotional bleeding between the two. This is why neighbors often say they never suspected anything. Understanding emotional detachment is crucial for both criminal profiling and public awareness. It explains why appeals to conscience or empathy fail with such offenders. They simply don't feel what we feel. Prevention involves early identification of psychopathic traits, especially in youth. Intervention programs focus on behavioral management rather than emotional rehabilitation, since genuine empathy cannot be taught to those neurologically incapable of feeling it. Recognizing this trick reveals the fundamental difference between serial killers and the rest of humanity. It's not just what they do, it's how they feel, or rather, don't feel, while doing it. Serial killers use these 5 psychological tricks: charm and manipulation, exploiting vulnerabilities, ritualistic behavior, psychological dependency, and emotional detachment to lure, control, and kill their victims while evading capture. Understanding these mechanisms is not about sensationalizing evil, but about empowering awareness, prevention, and protection. These tricks reveal the cold, calculated psychology behind seemingly inexplicable violence. By recognizing charm without empathy, vulnerability, exploitation, obsessive rituals, compulsive patterns, and emotional voids, we can better protect potential victims and support law enforcement in profiling and apprehending offenders. Knowledge is power. Awareness saves lives. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and never ignore red flags.